Okay students, so today in this video session we'll be actually covering about the sexual reproduction in flowers. Okay, sexual reproduction in the flowers. Now when we talk about the flower, the structure of flowers or the whorls, the parts of the flowers that make it a complete unit, they can be, as we all know, we are very familiar with that thing. One is your calyx, that is your sepals. Sepals play a very important function in case of flower, especially during the budding stage. When they are in the budding stage, they provide protection first of all, and secondly they also provide nutrition. As they are green in color, they are able to photosynthesize and they provide food in that manner. Now next we talk about the corolla, that is the petals. The petals are generally very bright, attractive, and sometimes they are beautifully arranged in order to attract the insects for the process of pollination. So that is the basic function of the petals, and which we call it the collectively as corolla. Then the most important is your androecium and the gynoecium. Now actually androecium is the male reproductive whole of the flower, while the gynoecium is the female reproductive whole of the flower. Now in general we call these as the accessory whorls or the non-essential whorls of the flower, and androecium and gynoecium, they are actually referred to as the reproductive whorls or the most essential whorls of the flower. So reproductive or the essential whorls. Now why do we call it the essential whorls? What is the necessity to address them with the term essential? The reason is flower means sexual reproduction. Okay, if there is sexual reproduction in plants, it is only through the flowers. That's why in flower also the most essential part will be the reproductive parts or the androecium and the gynoecium, and that's why they have been called as the essential whorls of the flower. Now today actually in this video session we will be focusing on most importantly the structure of the androecium, the structure of the gynoecium, and basically about the pollen that makes up the androecium, or which act as the most important thing which plays the important role in the sexual reproduction of the plants. And similarly in case of the gynoecium also we'll be studying in detail about the structure of the ovule, because that is something you need to know, you need to understand in order to understand the process of the sexual reproduction, that is the double fertilization and triple fusion. So let's proceed now. So starting with your male reproductive whorl, that is the androecium. Now when we talk about androecium, then we can say that basically it has a long filament like structure, and on top of that filament you have generally a bilobed structure. Okay, a bilobed head. Now why it is bilobed? Because you can see clearly it has two lobes, and hence we give it the name the bilobed structure. What is this called? This is called your anther. This is called your anther, and this whole thing is called your filament. Okay, so this is your anther, the head is called as your anther, and the stalk on which the bilobed head is resting, that is called your filament. Now talking about the structure of anther, you can see I showed you if it is having two lobes or it is bilobed, we use the word dithecous. Dithecous for bilobed or two lobed. If by chance you find a flower in which the stamen has a head, the anther is single lobed or mono or single lobed or has one lobe, then we use the term monothecous. Okay, so these are the two terms generally to address how the anther has been, what type of anther is present. If it is a bilobed or it has two lobes in it, then it will be referred to as the dithecous, and if it has one single lobe, then it will be referred to as the monothecous anther. Fine. Now actually we can see that this filament is actually attached to this anther, the bilobed or the monothecous or the dithecous anther, doesn't matter. So this particular soft tissue which is actually connecting the filament with the anther is referred to as the connective. Kindly don't misunderstand or misconceptualize it with the connective tissue. No, the name is connective. So connective is basically a soft tissue that connects the filament with the anther. The filament with the anther, or you can see the lobes of anther. Now inside, if I show you the section of this thing, if I take a 3D view of this thing, I just take a section of this particular part, I can show you that it would look something like this. I'm not able to draw this exactly, but I can just help you figure it out. You can see chambers, okay? You can see the chambers, and what exactly these chambers are, they are nothing but referred to as the pollen sacs. Okay, they are referred to as the pollen sacs, and for pollen sacs we also use another term, that is your microsporangia. We use microsporangia. Now when we talk about this microsporangia or the pollen sacs, so it is important for us to know that what exactly is present, how the cells have been arranged in this entire pollen sac, so that all the pollens, they are completely accommodated in this pollen sac, and how they rupture out in order to release the pollen, because ultimately the pollen has to be released in order to carry out the process of pollination. So how that thing takes place, how the cells have been arranged over here, so that's how we are now going to focus upon in this particular video. If it is a dithecus, first of all, if it is a dithecus or a bilobed anther, how many pollen sacs can you see? There are total 4. So you can say that it has 4 pollen sacs, and thus you can use the name, okay, let me adjust it over here, tetrasporangiate. We use the term tetrasporangiate, means there will be 4 pollen sacs. Okay, if it is a monothecous anther, then it will be having only 2 pollen sacs. Only 2 pollen sacs can be seen, and hence for 2 we use the word bi, and we write it as bisporangiate. We use the term bisporangiate. And how do the pollens actually develop? The pollens actually develop from specialized cells which we refer to as the archisporial cells, or you can say the primary archisporial cells, and these archisporial cells actually give rise to the, you can say, the mother cells, the mother microspore cells. I can write the name as the microspore mother cells. Now let me tell you, let me clarify it, that microspore is actually the word, the term which is used for pollen. So if I use the word microspore, kindly do not interpret it with something else. It is nothing but the pollen. The pollen is referred over here as the microspore. So they give rise to the microspore mother cells, which are actually, you can say, diploid in nature, means the number of chromosomes are in pairs. So hence I use the word 2n. Now these microspore mother cells will actually now undergo further division. Okay, that further division is meiosis. This did undergo mitosis, mitotic division. Now this microspore mother cells will undergo meiosis or the meiotic division, where the diploid cells will become haploid. So they give rise to the haploid daughter cells, and these haploid daughter cells are actually microspore. And let me tell you that one microspore mother cell is capable enough to give you actually 4 microspores. One microspore mother cells can give you 4 microspores. So this is the reason why pollen are produced in such large quantities. This is the only reason. The meiosis, in meiosis you can see the actual number of daughter cells you are getting, and that too haploid in nature. Okay. Now let me tell you one most important thing about the pollen's nutrition and nourishment, because that is again the most important part over here. How does it take place? Now you can see, if I make it very particular over here, you can see the inner walls. Okay, the inner walls of the pollen sacs and these pollen sacs are actually called as the tapetum. Some call it tapetum, some say it as tapetum. So the inner wall of the pollen sacs, they are referred to as the tapetum, and this tapetum is actually basically of two types. That is, one is your glandular, another one is your amoeboid. Okay, glandular tapetum is actually responsible for many secretions. It is responsible for many secretions, whereas the amoeboid is responsible for nourishment of the pollens. They are responsible for nourishment of the pollens. Now, how do they nourish them? What do they secrete so that the pollens get completely nourished? They secrete specifically lipid enriched. Okay, let me repeat it. It is lipid enriched. Lipid is the term used for fats. Okay, it is the lipid enriched sporopollenin. Okay, it is the lipid enriched sporopollenin. What does this do? Now the question will come that what exactly the sporopollenin is for? What role does it play? Sporopollenin actually increases the thickness. But thickness of what? It increases the thickness of the layers, outer layers of the pollen. The outer layers of the pollen. Specifically, if you ask me to specify which layer, then it is called the exine. If I have to specify that which layer, it is the exine which is actually thickened over here. Okay, and simultaneously there is another enzyme present over there which is called callase. Okay, what does this callase do? Callase is actually responsible for helping in the dehiscence of the anther, so that the callose present in the lining of the pollen sacs, you can say the lining of the inner wall of the pollen sacs, where all these pollens, they are kept in one place, that is completely digested. Callase is the enzyme which digests callose. What is callose? Callose is that particular substance or the sugar based ingredient which actually holds all the pollens completely intact in the pollen sac, attached to the wall, I should say. Once this callase is activated, it starts digesting the callose. If callose is digested, the pollen, they start getting away, withering out from the wall of the pollen sacs. They start getting away from it. They are completely isolated over there, and they are loosely attached at that time within that particular pollen sac, and once the wall will rupture, they will move out. This is called dehiscence of anther. So dehiscence of anther, I will actually cover it in the later most part. So this was just a mild introduction, you can say. Now coming to about the development of the pollen, as I said that it is basically from the primary archaeosporial cells which undergoes mitosis to the microspore, giving rise to the diploid microspore mother cells. Microspore mother cells, they will again undergo meiosis to give you haploid microspores. These haploid microspores are nothing but the pollen actually. I hope this thing is very clear. Now, if at any time this happens, that one single microspore mother cell is able to give more than four microspores, then what is that condition called? If there are more than 4 microspore from one microspore mother cell, what is that condition called? We call it polyspory. Exactly the same thing which we had come across, the term called polyspermy, we use polyspory. So basically, if I have to say that what is polyspory, so polyspory is the condition in which the microspore mother cell is able to give more than 4 microspores. That's it. Now I hope this basic part of your anther, the structure of the pollen sac, the bilobe, the monothecus, dithecus, I hope this basic content is clear to you. Now we will be moving towards the next segment of this video, that is about the pollen. Okay, so if I have to talk about pollen, then let me tell you that what basically it is called. Okay, so if I say that what is study of pollen called, then definitely you will give me a name. So I don't expect right now that you will say it out there. If you know it, it's good. Just like study of tissue is called histology, study of cells is called cytology, about neurons, the nervous system is called neurology and all. So similarly, for the study of microsporos, the pollen is known as, I hope you would have guessed it by right now, so it is actually called palynology. Okay, it is called palynology. Palynology actually refers to the study of the structure of pollen. Actually, when I say structure, I imply to morphology. Morphology means the outermost characteristics, those features that constitute or that give the proper appearance to a particular pollen grain. That is called your palynology. Okay, so now moving on to the next part in your palynology, what you will be exactly studying, that is actually about the pollen grain structure. So if I say about a pollen grain, it has outermost two layers. Okay, two layers which guard it. Okay, the inner layer is called the intine, and one outermost layer which is called the exine. I hope the diagram is pretty visible to you and it is a bit sort of clear. If it is not artistic, it's sort of clear that what exactly it shows. Okay, now this is called your exine and this is innermost layer is called your intine. You can actually see, as I use the word sporopollenin is actually responsible for maintaining the thickness of this exine, while you can see there are places where the exine is not continuous. Okay, there are places where this exine is not continuous, and in fact these are the places where the intine gets thickened. You can say a sort of places where the intines get thickened. So what are these places called? These are actually referred to as the germ pores, and we will come to know, we'll focus on the what is the role of this germ pore. Now let's first highlight the significance of the cytoplasm of this entire pollen grain. Now this entire space, it is actually rich with the fluid, which again has a great content of this carbohydrates. Okay, so if I say which thing makes up, so I can say it is made up of carbohydrates and a lot of unsaturated fatty acids. Okay, a lot of unsaturated fatty acids as well as the carbohydrates. Now if you will ask that which carbohydrate in specifically you have to mention that, then I would like to mention that it is nothing but your starch, a greater component of starch. Composition wise, if I have to highlight, then it is actually starch, which is found abundantly in this entire space of the pollen grain. I hope this part is clear. Now talking about this composition of the exine and this intine. Okay, so exine, as I said, it is made up of the lipid enriched sporopollenin. It is made up of the lipid enriched sporopollenin, and while the intine is actually made up of hemicellulose, and sometimes they use the word for this, that is pectocellulose, means a derivative, cellulose derivative of pectin. Okay, it is the cellulose derivative of pectin. Now simultaneously there are also enzymes present in the intine which help in carrying out various processes like the elongation of the pollen tube. Okay, now if a pollen grain has 3 germ pores, as you can see over here in this diagram, how many I have drawn? 1, 2, 3. If there are 3 germ pores, then what name do we use for this thing? A term. Now actually biology is having a lot of terms. You have a full dictionary for this. You can write down your own index. It is filled with so many terms for this thing. So similarly over here also, for if a pollen grain has 3 germ pores, then what is it called? It is called tricolpid. Okay, it is called tricolpid, and this tricolpid type of pollen grain is actually seen in dicot seeded plants. It is seen in dicot seeded plants. When we talk about monocot seeded plants or the monocots, we see only one germ pore. Only one germ pore is seen generally, and we call it the monocolpate. We call it the monocolpate. So I hope this basic outermost structure is quite easily understood by you. You can follow what exactly I have tried to say over here, the composition of the basic outermost part over here. Now let's move to the interiors of the pollen, in which whatever is present inside this cytoplasm, we would like to see that what exactly it consists of. Okay, now let me highlight that exactly what are the contents which are present in this particular pollen, inside of this pollen. Now the whole of this protoplast, it is actually divided into two cells, two most important cells, that is a large one. It is divided unequally. Let me highlight this. It is divided unequally, and if divided unequally, it actually gives you one large, one small. So one large, you can say the tube nucleus or the vegetative nucleus, and the small generative, let me tell you, tube nucleus or the tube cell, I should say, the tube cell which has the tube nucleus. You can write that. We also call it the vegetative one, while this second or the small one is the generative nucleus, or we also can address this as the generative cell. Now when we talk about this generative nucleus and this generative cell, actually what happens, this generative cell further undergoes a division to give rise to generally two male gametes. Two male gametes. So in total, if you find this whole thing has reached its maturity, in that you see three cells in total. One is a tube nucleus, and tube nucleus is actually pretty bigger in the aspects in comparison to other two. So you can see it has almost become a puffer fish with a dog face. Anyways, we can ignore that thing. So you can see two generative nuclei, which the generative cell which has given rise to two male gametes, and this one is actually the tube cell or the vegetative cell. Now what is the function of this tube cell actually? Now at the time it has reached its maturity and it has landed on a particular stigma of the gynoecium. Over there the tube cell actually gives rise to the pollen tube. Okay, it gives rise to the pollen tube. The whole of this pollen tube comes out of this intine or the germ pore. So germ pore has this significance. This entire, you can say, the tube nucleus is going to redirect the way or create a pollen tube through this germ pore along the style of the gynoecium, in order to facilitate the movement of these two male gametes down the entire path of the gynoecium, so that they can reach the ovule and they can fertilize the egg cell that is present inside. So that is the whole of the phenomena over here. Now if I talk to you about what is a male gametophyte, because many times in botany also we come across this word that they generally use this gametophyte. Okay, so if any time it is asked to you that what is the male gametophyte in case of a flowering plant, so male gametophyte actually consists of this mature pollen grain in which the tube nucleus has helped you to produce the pollen tube, and the generative nucleus has given you two male gametes. So this whole set of thing you can see over here, the pollen tube, the generative nucleus produced male gametes, as well as the tube nucleus. Together these three along with the pollen tube, the entire of this pollen grain, they form the male gametophyte. Okay, so if anytime you are supposed to highlight the whole of the stuff, then you can make it a point that you include these terms. So the pollen tube is there, the male gametes are there out of the generative nucleus, and this particular from the tube nucleus, the pollen tube has been coming out or emerging out. So I hope this basic structure of the pollen is pretty clear. The significance of the germ pore, the concept of this pollen tube, male gametophyte, generative nucleus, the tube nucleus, what is the function of this. Now the role of this pollen grain, the pollen tube and all, it is even more pronounced, or it comes into more prominence only when we study the other part, the other reproductive wall, that is the gynoecium. So gynoecium, we will be covering it in the next video.